At the cafe, a single mom asked, "Can we share your fries, sir?" Not knowing he was a billionaire, it was a quiet Wednesday morning, the kind of morning when the city seemed to breathe slowly, as if still waking up. The streets were not yet crowded with the usual rush of cars and pedestrians. In this calm corner of the city, a small cafe sat quietly, almost like a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. The sign above the door swung gently in the morning breeze, and the smell of freshly baked bread and brewing coffee drifted out, inviting anyone nearby to step in and stay a while. Inside the cafe, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Wooden tables and chairs were arranged neatly, and soft sunlight spilled through the windows, creating patterns on the floor. There was a quiet hum of conversation, the clinking of cups and saucers, and the gentle hiss of the coffee machine working in the background. It was the kind of place that felt safe, comfortable, and ordinary, a little refuge from the busy world outside. Sarah walked into the cafe holding her son's hand tightly. She was a single mother of two children, and every day was a careful balancing act. Her life was not easy. She worked long hours at a part-time job, barely making enough to pay rent and buy groceries. At the same time, she tried to give her children as normal a life as possible, filling their days with love, laughter, and small joys that didn't cost much. Today was special. She had decided to treat her children to breakfast at the cafe, something they rarely got to enjoy. Her daughter skipped a few steps ahead, eyes wide at the sight of the colorful pastries displayed on the counter. Her son tugged at her hand gently, already scanning the menu with curiosity. Sarah smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest that no amount of tiredness could take away. She knew these small moments were precious. Even if life was hard, these little outings were reminders that happiness could be found in the simplest things. Sarah looked around the cafe, searching for a table. Most of the seats were empty, but she wanted one that felt private enough so that her children could be themselves without disturbing anyone. She noticed a man sitting alone at a corner table, working quietly on a laptop. He was dressed neatly in a dark suit, with polished shoes and an air of calm about him. His presence was unobtrusive, and he seemed absorbed in whatever he was doing. Sarah didn't know it at the time, but this man's life was far from ordinary. Unlike the people around him, he lived in a world of unimaginable wealth and influence, though he chose to remain anonymous in public places like this cafe. As Sarah led her children to a small table near the window, she felt a familiar tug of anxiety. She always worried about money, about whether she could afford small treats, about whether she was doing enough for her kids. She had learned to hide these worries behind a smile, especially in public. Today, however, she wanted to forget her worries, at least for a little while, and simply enjoy the simple pleasure of a breakfast out. She sat down and helped her children settle in, smoothing the hair of her daughter and straightening her son's shirt. She wanted them to feel comfortable, to know that this moment was theirs. The children were excited, pointing at the menu and whispering about the pancakes, muffins, and other treats they wanted to try. Sarah chuckled quietly, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. It was a small victory, a normal morning for other families, but a rare and treasured moment for them. As she waited for the waiter to take their order, Sarah's mind wandered briefly. She thought about the bills piling up at home, the endless tasks waiting for her once she returned, and the challenges she faced every single day. But she also thought about her children's laughter, their bright eyes, and the little things that made life meaningful. For a moment, she allowed herself to just breathe, to enjoy the simple sounds of the cafe, the soft chatter, the occasional laughter, and the comforting rhythm of cups and plates being set down. Meanwhile, across the room, the man in the suit continued his work, occasionally glancing up at the window or at people walking by. He was used to attention, though he had spent years learning to avoid it. The quiet anonymity of the cafe allowed him a rare moment of peace. He had everything money could buy, yet he often sought comfort in ordinary places where no one knew his name. There was something grounding about sitting among strangers, about feeling part of a world that was simple and unassuming. Back at her table, Sarah's children were chatting happily, their excitement palpable. She ordered pancakes, eggs, and a small portion of fries, something her children loved but rarely had. As she waited for the food, she kept an eye on her children, making sure they were content and safe. Her heart swelled with affection and a quiet pride. Despite the hardships, she had managed to give them these little moments of joy, and she hoped they would remember them for years to come. The waiter brought the food, placing it carefully on the table. The children's eyes lit up and they thanked her with wide smiles. Sarah smiled back, feeling a small but meaningful sense of accomplishment. She knew that these little moments, though fleeting, were the things that truly mattered in life. It wasn't about money or status. It was about love, care, and the bonds they shared as a family. As they began to eat, Sarah's mind wandered briefly again, this time noticing the man at the corner table. There was something calm and composed about him, something that made him seem almost untouchable in a way. She didn't know who he was, but there was a quiet dignity in the way he sat, the way he moved, and the way he observed the world around him. It was a reminder that life was full of strangers with their own stories, each carrying their own struggles and victories. Sarah's attention returned to her children, who were now laughing over a small disagreement about who would get the last fry. She laughed too, feeling the tension of her daily worries ease for a moment. This was what she lived for, the small, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because of the love surrounding them. She realized that happiness wasn't something to chase. It was something to notice, something that could be found in the smallest details of everyday life. Unbeknownst to her, the man in the corner had noticed her too. There was something about her, the way she cared for her children, the gentle patience in her smile, and the quiet determination in her eyes, that caught his attention. He had seen people from all walks of life, but there was an authenticity about her that was rare. In that ordinary cafe, amidst the soft morning light and the hum of everyday life, a connection began to form, though neither of them realized how significant it would become. The morning continued in this quiet, simple rhythm. Sarah and her children enjoyed their breakfast, savoring every bite and every laugh. Outside, the city continued to wake up, unaware of the small, meaningful story unfolding in the corner of the cafe. It was just another ordinary morning, yet it carried within it the possibility of something extraordinary, a reminder that even in the simplest moments, life could surprise you in ways you never expected. After settling in and enjoying the warmth of the cafe, Sarah noticed something that made her pause for a moment. Her young son, full of curiosity and excitement, had reached across the table while trying to grab a fry and accidentally tipped over the small plate she had set for him. The fries scattered across the table, some landing on the floor. Her heart skipped a beat, and a wave of embarrassment washed over her. She could feel her cheeks growing warm, and she quickly tried to pick up the scattered fries, muttering apologies to her children. Her daughter, noticing her mother's worry, leaned over and whispered, "It's okay, Mom. Don't worry." But Sarah could see the small frown in her daughter's eyes. She didn't want the kids to feel bad, and she certainly didn't want anyone else in the cafe to notice the small accident. In that moment, the familiar anxiety of being judged, of feeling inadequate, crept back in. Life as a single mother was always a balancing act, and every small mistake sometimes felt magnified. It was then that Sarah's eyes fell on the man sitting at the corner table. He had noticed the little accident, but instead of looking annoyed or turning away, he simply gave a small, gentle smile. There was something in his expression that reassured her, though she didn't understand why. Encouraged by his calm demeanor, Sarah gathered her courage. She stood up, holding her son's hand, and walked toward his table. Her voice was soft but steady as she asked, almost hesitantly, "Excuse me, sir, can we share your fries?" She felt a wave of nervousness, wondering if she had overstepped or if he might say no. Her eyes flickered between her children and the man, hoping for a kind response. The man looked up from his laptop. His eyes were warm and attentive, and when he saw the honesty in Sarah's expression, he didn't hesitate. He nodded with a gentle smile. "Of course," he said simply, pushing the plate of fries slightly toward her. "Take as much as you need." Her children's faces lit up as she returned to the table with the plate of fries. The atmosphere around them shifted slightly. The tension melted, replaced with a quiet warmth. Sarah couldn't help but notice the kindness in the stranger's eyes, something rare and sincere. As her children started eating, Sarah's curiosity got the better of her. She glanced back at the man and a thought crossed her mind. He seemed ordinary in his actions, but there was a calmness, a confidence in his presence that suggested there was more to him than met the eye. Yet she reminded herself it was none of her business. Life had taught her to focus on what she could control, her children, her work, and her small joys, rather than wondering about strangers. Meanwhile, the man observed the small family at their table. There was something about Sarah that drew his attention, the quiet determination in her movements, the way she carefully helped her children, and the gentle patience she showed even in a moment of minor chaos. He had seen people from every walk of life, but there was a simplicity and authenticity about her that made him pause. He felt a rare connection, a small spark of understanding that is hard to explain. It was not often that he met someone whose presence felt genuine and unaffected by appearances. Sarah returned to her children and continued to share the fries. The small meal, which might have seemed insignificant to anyone else, became a source of laughter and conversation. Her son happily grabbed a fry, and her daughter joked about who would eat the last one. Sarah laughed along with them, feeling a warmth in her heart that she had not felt in a long time. It was in these little moments, amidst the ordinary chaos of everyday life, that she found true happiness. As they ate, she occasionally glanced at the man. She noticed that he had returned to his laptop but would glance up every so often, watching them with a quiet interest. She didn't know why, but she felt a sense of comfort from his presence. It reminded her that kindness could come from unexpected places, that the world was not always as harsh as it sometimes felt. The man, for his part, quietly joined their small conversation when he could. At first, it was just small gestures, a nod, a smile, or a short comment to the children about their fries. His voice was calm and gentle, and the children responded immediately with laughter and curiosity. Sarah noticed how natural his interactions with her children were, and a small sense of ease settled over her. The world often felt heavy, but here, in this simple cafe, life seemed lighter. As they continued eating, Sarah began to open up a little more, speaking softly about her life. She talked about the small struggles she faced as a single mother, how every day was a challenge but also filled with small joys. She spoke of the dreams she had for her children, hoping to give them opportunities she hadn't had. The man listened quietly, nodding and occasionally asking gentle questions, showing genuine interest without prying too much. He didn't speak of wealth, status, or success. Instead, he listened, truly listened, as Sarah shared her story. In that moment, the ordinary act of sharing fries became something extraordinary, a bridge between two very different lives. There was a sense of mutual respect, a quiet understanding that kindness and human connection were far more valuable than anything money could buy. The children, meanwhile, were completely at ease. They laughed, shared stories, and even tried to include the man in their little jokes. He responded with warmth, careful to make them feel included and comfortable. Sarah watched this interaction, a small smile on her face. It was rare to find someone who could connect with her children so naturally, without any pretense or expectation. Time seemed to slow down in that small corner of the cafe. The world outside continued with its usual pace, but inside, a small moment of connection unfolded, a moment that felt suspended in time. Sarah felt a quiet sense of gratitude, not just for the fries, but for the kindness and attention shown by this stranger. It reminded her that even in the midst of life's challenges, there were moments of beauty, moments that restored hope and faith in humanity. As breakfast continued, Sarah began to notice small details about the man. There was a gentleness in his gestures, a thoughtfulness in the way he interacted, and a calmness in the way he observed the world. It struck her that people could carry their own burdens and stories just like her, yet still choose to be kind. This small act of generosity, a simple sharing of fries, was more meaningful than any grand gesture could have been. By the time their breakfast was finishing, a quiet bond had formed. It wasn't a loud or dramatic connection, but a subtle one, built on shared laughter, small acts of kindness, and genuine human interaction. Sarah felt a rare sense of relief and comfort, knowing that in a world that often seemed unforgiving, there were still people who cared, people who noticed the small moments and responded with empathy. The man glanced at the children, who were now happily finishing the last of the fries. He smiled, feeling a rare sense of fulfillment. In his life, filled with meetings, obligations, and responsibilities, he often forgot the simple joy of connecting with others. Yet here, in this ordinary cafe, he had shared something small but meaningful, a reminder that kindness could touch lives in ways far beyond what anyone could measure. As they prepared to leave the table, Sarah thanked him again, her voice filled with sincerity. "Thank you so much," she said softly. "You don't know how much this means to us." The man nodded, his eyes gentle and understanding. "Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference," he replied. Walking back to her seat, Sarah felt a mixture of gratitude and awe. She didn't know who this man was, what his story was, or why he had chosen to be kind to her family. All she knew was that in that ordinary moment, he had made an extraordinary impact on their morning, their day, and perhaps even their outlook on life. For her children, it was just a fun breakfast, a shared plate of fries and a friendly man who had made them laugh. But for Sarah, it was a quiet lesson in hope, empathy, and the power of human connection. She realized that kindness could come in unexpected forms, from unexpected people, and that even a small gesture could carry immense meaning. And in that moment, both Sarah and the man at the corner table felt a quiet acknowledgement that life, despite its hardships, still had moments worth savoring, moments that reminded them of the goodness in the world, the value of connection, and the magic of shared humanity. After sharing the fries, a comfortable silence settled over Sarah and her children. But it wasn't the awkward kind of silence that makes people uneasy. It was the quiet, warm kind that comes when people feel safe around one another. Sarah watched her children laugh and chatter, their faces glowing with happiness. The small moment of shared food had transformed into something deeper, a subtle connection that felt unexpectedly meaningful. Across the table, the man in the suit observed them quietly, a gentle smile on his face. He wasn't used to these ordinary, uncomplicated moments. In his life, there were always meetings, deadlines, and decisions that carried weight far beyond everyday understanding. But here, in this small cafe, he felt something different, a sense of calm, of purpose, simply from listening to a mother and her children. Sarah's daughter noticed him glancing their way and waved shyly. The man waved back, careful not to startle her. Her son, encouraged by his sister, spoke up. "Thank you for letting us share your fries, mister." His words were simple, but his sincerity touched him deeply. He nodded and smiled, replying, "You're very welcome. It was my pleasure." Today, however, she realized there was no danger, only kindness. She returned her attention to the man, her curiosity growing stronger. Something about him drew her in, a calm, approachable demeanor that made her feel comfortable talking to him, despite the fact that she had just met him. Summoning courage, Sarah spoke softly. "You know, it's not easy to find people willing to help strangers. You didn't have to do that for us. Thank you." Her words were heartfelt, carrying a sense of vulnerability that she rarely displayed. The man looked at her, genuinely attentive, as if he wanted to understand not just her words but the life behind them. "I know," he said quietly, "but sometimes it's the small gestures that matter the most. A little kindness can go a long way." His voice was calm, steady, and sincere. It carried a weight that surprised her, not because it was profound, but because it was so genuine. Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and humility. Life is not always easy, she said. Being a single mom is, well, it's a challenge every single day. Some days feel impossible. She paused, unsure whether she should continue, but the man's encouraging expression gave her the courage to speak freely. I work part-time, try to make ends meet, and sometimes I wonder if it's enough. I just want my kids to have opportunities I never had. There was a quiet attentiveness in him that made her feel seen and heard, something she hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't offer platitudes or judgment, only a compassionate presence that allowed her to speak openly. It was remarkable how comforting it was to share her thoughts with someone who simply listened. Her children, sensing that their mother was sharing something personal, stayed quiet for a moment. Her son fiddled with the straw of his juice, and her daughter looked curiously at the man. He smiled gently at them, acknowledging their presence without breaking the focus on their mother. "You're doing an amazing job," he said softly. "I can tell how much you care for your children." His words weren't just kind. They were validating, a reminder that her struggles mattered and that her love for her children was recognized, even by a stranger. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply breathe, to let the tension and anxiety of everyday life fall away. Here in this cafe, amidst the aroma of fresh coffee and the soft murmur of other patrons, she felt a sense of relief that was rare in her life. It wasn't just about the fries. It was about being seen, being understood, and connecting with someone who genuinely cared. The man, meanwhile, found himself unexpectedly drawn into the conversation. He had spent years interacting with people, but rarely in moments like this. Most encounters in his life were transactional, meetings, negotiations, networking. Here, there was no agenda, no expectation, only honesty. He felt a quiet admiration for Sarah and her resilience. He knew life hadn't been easy for her, yet she carried herself with grace, patience, and love. Curiosity got the better of him, and he asked gently, "What dreams do you have for your children?" His question was simple, yet it carried a sincere interest. Sarah looked at him, surprised by the genuine care in his tone. She took a moment to gather her thoughts. "I just want them to have a better life than I did," she said softly. "I want them to feel safe, to have opportunities to learn, to chase their dreams without worrying about money or hardship. I want them to know that life can be kind, even when it's difficult." Promises she had made to herself and to her children, promises she worked tirelessly to keep every single day. He admired her strength, recognizing the courage it took to face each day with limited resources yet unlimited love. The children, sensing the gravity of the conversation, stayed attentive. Her son spoke up innocently, "Mommy, will they be okay?" Sarah smiled softly, touching his hand gently. "Yes, sweetie," she said. "We'll make sure everything will be okay." The man watched this interaction with warmth in his heart. It was clear how deeply she cared, how much she sacrificed, and how her love shaped the small family's world. As the conversation continued, Sarah found herself talking about small victories as well as hardships. The time she managed to save a little for a school trip, the joy of seeing her children achieve something new, the pride she felt watching them grow. She spoke about moments that were ordinary to others but extraordinary to her because they represented hope, perseverance, and love. The man listened quietly, occasionally adding a kind word or question that encouraged her to continue. "What's your favorite memory with them?" he asked. Sarah thought for a moment and smiled. "Honestly," she said, "it's moments like this, just being together, laughing over something silly, sharing a meal, talking about our day. Those are the memories that stay with you." She realized that sometimes, sharing your story, even with a stranger, could lift a burden you didn't even know you were carrying. It reminded her that human connection, simple, genuine, and kind, was a gift that could transform even ordinary mornings. The man, for his part, felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of groundedness. His life was filled with pressure, responsibility, and wealth that often created distance between him and others. But here, listening to Sarah, engaging with her children, and sharing in their laughter, he remembered what it felt like to connect without pretense. He was not there as a businessman or a wealthy individual. He was simply a human being, sharing a quiet moment of empathy. Sarah noticed the man's gentle attention to her children. He asked them small questions, encouraging them to speak, to share little stories about their day or their favorite games. The children responded eagerly, laughing and chatting freely. Sarah watched this interaction, feeling a rare sense of gratitude. It was one thing for a stranger to be kind to her. It was another to treat her children with the same warmth and respect. By the time breakfast plates were nearly empty, a sense of closeness had developed between them. It was subtle, unspoken, yet undeniable. Sarah felt a new sense of hope and calm, knowing that moments of kindness could appear when least expected. The man had not only shared his fries but had also shared attention, understanding, and genuine interest in her life. It was a reminder that even small gestures could ripple outward, affecting people in ways that were both profound and lasting. The children, happy and content, had finished their meal. They chatted quietly among themselves, their laughter echoing softly in the cafe. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a sense of completion, not just from the meal, but from the emotional experience that had unfolded. Today had been ordinary, yet extraordinary, a simple breakfast transformed by connection and compassion. And in that quiet corner of the cafe, neither Sarah nor the man realized how much this simple act, sharing fries, sharing stories, sharing laughter, would change the course of their day, and eventually their lives. By the time breakfast plates were cleared, the morning sun had risen higher, spilling warm light across the small cafe. Sarah's children were content and quietly chatting with each other, while she sat back in her chair, savoring the calmness of the moment. For once, the stress of life, the bills, the worries, the endless responsibilities, felt distant. It was as though the small act of sharing fries and connecting with a kind stranger had created a bubble of peace around them. The man in the suit had been quietly observing, occasionally smiling at the children or nodding to Sarah as they spoke. He had grown increasingly impressed by her resilience and warmth. In all his years, he had met countless people, but rarely someone whose inner strength and kindness shone so clearly, even under the weight of life's struggles. Every word she spoke revealed not just a mother trying to survive, but a woman shaping her children's world with love and courage. For the first time that morning, he spoke with a quiet seriousness. "Sarah," he began, choosing her name carefully as if it carried weight, "there's something I want to tell you, something important." She looked at him, a little surprised. The children paused, sensing the change in tone. Sarah felt her curiosity mix with a hint of apprehension. "I need to tell you the truth about who I am," he said slowly. "I know it may seem strange, but it's only fair that you know. I am not just an ordinary man sitting in this cafe." He paused again, watching her expression. She tilted her head slightly, unsure what to expect. "I am a billionaire," he continued. "I own companies, businesses, and properties around the world. Most people know me only by my name in the news, but I try to live quietly in places like this because I value anonymity. Today, however, I wanted to meet ordinary people, to experience a moment of real human connection." A billionaire, the man who had smiled at her children, who had shared his fries, who had listened to her story so kindly. He was not just an ordinary stranger. She felt a strange mix of disbelief and awe. For a moment, all she could do was stare, processing what this revelation meant. Her children looked at her, sensing the surprise in her expression. "Mommy, is he rich?" her daughter asked innocently. Sarah nodded slowly, still trying to absorb the truth. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "He is very rich, but that doesn't change who he is right now. He is just a kind man who shared his breakfast with us." "It's not my intention to cause confusion or make anyone uncomfortable. I only wanted to be honest because I respect your strength, your honesty, and the care you show for your children." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound mixture of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. Here was someone who had every material advantage in life, yet he had chosen to be kind, unassuming, and genuinely caring. I don't know what to say," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "I mean, thank you. But I never expected something like this." Her children clung to her side, sensing the emotional weight of the moment. She felt both small and significant at the same time, small in the face of someone so wealthy, but significant because her courage and kindness had touched him deeply enough to inspire generosity. The man leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, your life is not easy, and I have seen the strength and love you pour into your children. It is rare and remarkable. I want to help, not as charity, but as a gesture of recognition for the life you are building and the love you are giving." Accepting help felt strange, even uncomfortable. Yet she looked at him, the genuine kindness in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, and realized that this offer was not meant to humiliate or control, but to support. "I don't know how to accept something like this," she admitted softly. "I've always tried to do everything myself. I don't want anyone to feel obligated, or to feel that I am taking advantage of their kindness. And this isn't about me or what I have. It's about helping your children, helping you, and showing that life can be better when people care." For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a life where the constant pressure of survival was eased, where her children could dream freely, and where small joys didn't feel like luxuries. Finally, she spoke, her voice steadier now, touched with emotion. If you are willing, I would be grateful for any help you can give. Not because I can't manage, but because this could give my children opportunities I can't provide on my own. And I promise, nothing comes with conditions, no obligations, no expectations beyond your happiness and your children's well-being." Today, an ordinary breakfast had turned into a life-changing moment, a reminder that kindness, empathy, and human connection could transcend all boundaries. The man, watching their reactions, felt a quiet satisfaction as well. He had spent years navigating a world filled with wealth and influence, often surrounded by people who were interested only in what he could offer. Yet here, sharing a simple breakfast, listening to a mother's story, and seeing her children laugh freely, he felt something more valuable than all his fortunes. A genuine human connection, honest and unpretentious. They continued to talk for a few more minutes, discussing practical steps for the assistance he wanted to provide, while keeping the conversation light and comfortable. Sarah felt an incredible sense of clarity. She realized that help did not diminish her independence or her strength. Rather, it was an acknowledgement of the courage, love, and dedication she showed every day. As the morning wore on, the man rose to leave. He waved to the children, who waved back eagerly, still full of excitement from the breakfast and the encounter. Sarah followed him to the door, her heart full. "Thank you," she said again, her voice soft but steady, "for everything. I will never forget this morning. And remember, it's not the money or the fame that matters. It's the choices we make to be kind, to be human, and to lift each other up." With that, he walked out into the city streets, disappearing as quietly as he had arrived, leaving behind a small but life-changing ripple in Sarah's world. Sarah returned to her table, her children clinging to her side. They talked excitedly about what had just happened, their voices filled with joy and wonder. For Sarah, the morning had been transformed from an ordinary breakfast into a story she would carry in her heart forever, a story of kindness, humility, and unexpected generosity. And as they left the cafe, hand in hand, Sarah knew that her life had shifted in ways she could not yet fully understand. The simple act of sharing fries had become a moment that redefined hope, possibility, and the beauty of human connection. In that ordinary morning, they had experienced something extraordinary, a reminder that life, even in its smallest moments, could surprise you in the most incredible ways. Weeks passed since that extraordinary morning at the cafe. For Sarah, life had started to shift in ways she had only dared to imagine in fleeting moments of hope. The quiet generosity of the stranger, now no longer just a man in a suit, but a billionaire who had chosen to recognize her courage and kindness, had opened doors that once seemed firmly closed. Yet despite the sudden change, Sarah remained grounded, determined to preserve the humility, love, and resilience that had always defined her life. Her days now carried a new sense of calm. Bills no longer piled up like mountains on her kitchen counter, and the constant worry about how to provide for her children had eased. She could breathe more deeply, laugh more freely, and savor small joys without the gnawing anxiety that had once accompanied every action. The small fund that had been set up for her home and her children's education provided stability, yes, but more importantly, it offered her freedom, the freedom to focus on love, parenting, and her children's happiness. Sarah noticed a subtle difference in her children, too. Her daughter walked a little taller, more confident in her daily school life, while her son's curiosity seemed to blossom even more. They didn't yet fully understand the full scope of what had happened, but they sensed that life had become lighter, safer, and filled with more possibilities. For Sarah, this was the true victory, not wealth itself, but the peace and hope it brought to her small family. Despite the changes, Sarah was careful not to let the moment of generosity define her entirely. She continued to wake early, prepare meals, and help her children with homework. The rhythms of her life remained familiar, grounded in love and care. Yet now she carried a quiet confidence, a sense that the world could be kinder than she had once believed. She had been reminded that extraordinary acts of kindness existed in the world, and that they could arrive unexpectedly, without warning, transforming ordinary lives into stories of hope. One afternoon, Sarah and her children visited a small park near their home. The sun was warm and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. Her children laughed as they played, chasing each other across the grass, their voices echoing in the open air. Sarah watched them, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. She realized that while money had provided comfort, it was love, presence, and attention that truly shaped a child's world. Every laugh, every hug, every moment spent together had immeasurable value. She remembered that morning at the cafe, the nervous step forward, the simple question about sharing fries, and the stranger's warm, unexpected kindness. It seemed almost magical now, the way one small gesture had changed everything. Sarah reflected on how life often worked in mysterious ways. Sometimes, the smallest, simplest moments had the power to create ripple effects that changed entire lives. At home, she began to think about the future more deliberately. Her children's education became a priority, not just academically, but in nurturing their creativity, curiosity, and sense of self-worth. She enrolled her children in new classes, bought books they had always wanted to read, and encouraged them to explore their passions. For the first time, she didn't feel constrained by financial limitations. She felt supported and empowered to invest in their growth. Yet Sarah's humility remained intact. She never boasted about the help they had received, and she never allowed it to overshadow the values she had worked so hard to instill in her children. She wanted them to grow up understanding that kindness, generosity, and empathy were far more important than money or fame. She emphasized the importance of helping others, of noticing small opportunities to make a difference, and of valuing people for who they were, not what they owned. The encounter at the cafe had also changed her own perspective on human connection. Sarah found herself more open to engaging with strangers, more willing to listen, and more willing to trust that the world could hold unexpected goodness. She noticed the small acts of kindness around her, a neighbor offering to help carry groceries, a teacher going the extra mile for a student, or even a stranger holding the door open without expectation. These moments, once easily overlooked, now felt significant, echoing the lesson she had learned that morning, that every act of kindness mattered, no matter how small. Her children, too, began to internalize these lessons. Her daughter started helping classmates at school without being asked, while her son shared toys and snacks with friends in a way that reflected the simple generosity they had experienced firsthand. Sarah smiled as she observed these small acts, realizing that the morning at the cafe had created not just a change in circumstance, but a subtle shift in character, a reminder that kindness spreads through example and lived experience. One evening, as they gathered around their modest dinner table, Sarah reflected quietly on the journey they had been on. She thought about the anxiety, the exhaustion, and the constant worry of life before that fateful morning. And she thought about the stranger, the man who had shared his fries, listened to her story, and offered support without expectation. His actions had reminded her that generosity was not defined by wealth alone, but by the willingness to see and honor another person's humanity. Even with the changes, Sarah never lost sight of the lessons she had learned in hardship. She continued to teach her children the value of resilience, perseverance, and gratitude. She encouraged them to face challenges with courage, to find joy in ordinary moments, and to appreciate the kindness of others. The billionaire's generosity had provided an opportunity, but it was Sarah's love, guidance, and dedication that would shape the lives of her children in the long run. Months later, Sarah found herself back at the same cafe, this time with a quiet sense of familiarity and comfort. The small corner table where the initial meeting had taken place was empty, but the memories of that morning were vivid. She smiled as she ordered a simple breakfast for her children, thinking about how far they had come. She realized that life was full of surprises, and that moments of connection, when hearts met in honesty, kindness, and respect, could create lasting change. Her children laughed over pancakes and muffins, their joy filling the small cafe. Sarah watched them, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. She knew that while life would still have challenges, the foundation of love, care, and support was stronger than ever. They had been given not just material help, but a renewed sense of possibility, a reminder that even ordinary lives could be touched by extraordinary kindness. That day, as she left the cafe, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She reflected on the stranger's words, that kindness, empathy, and shared humanity mattered more than anything else. And she made a quiet promise to herself, to carry forward that same spirit of generosity, humility, and compassion in her own life. She would teach her children that giving, listening, and noticing others was just as important as receiving. Over time, Sarah's story became a quiet inspiration for those around her. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues noticed the change, not in wealth or appearance, but in the calm, confident, and grateful way she carried herself. She became a living example of how acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching more lives than anyone could ever anticipate. Her children grew up with opportunities they might never have had, pursuing dreams and exploring passions without fear of financial limitation. Yet through it all, they remained grounded, humble, and aware of the importance of empathy and human connection. Sarah had ensured that the true lesson of that morning, the power of kindness and shared humanity, remained at the center of their lives. Looking back, Sarah often thought about that small moment in the cafe, when a simple question about sharing fries had led to an encounter that changed everything. She marveled at how life worked in mysterious ways, how small gestures could create profound transformations, and how moments of connection could remind people of what truly mattered. And so life continued, not perfect, not without challenges, but richer in meaning, love, and hope. Sarah and her children carried forward the lessons of that morning, living each day with gratitude, kindness, and humility. The encounter with the stranger had been a turning point, but it was the strength of their hearts, the bond they shared, and the care they extended to others that would define their lives for years to come. In the end, the story was not just about a billionaire or the breakfast that day. It was about the enduring power of empathy, the quiet courage of a single mother, and the extraordinary impact of simple kindness. It was a story that reminded them, and anyone who heard it, that ordinary moments, when met with honesty, humility, and love, could become extraordinary memories that shaped lives forever. And as Sarah tucked her children into bed that night, listening to their soft, contented breaths, she knew that despite everything, they had found something rare and precious: hope, security, and a reminder that life, even in its ordinary moments, could hold extraordinary beauty.